Want a podcast? Kia ora, I'm Maxene, podcast producer, audio nerd, and founder of Maxene London Creative. Let's explore what it takes to start and maintain a successful podcast. I'll chat with industry experts, podcast hosts, and fellow audio nerds on everything about the wonderful world of podcasting. We'll talk techniques, trends, and top tips to get you started on your podcast journey. Whether you're a podcast newbie or you've been here a while, welcome. Want a podcast? Today's episode is a real treat, especially if you love broadcasting, content creation, or just great storytelling. I'm joined by the incredible Sharyn Casey, a powerhouse of New Zealand radio, TV, and entertainment. Sharyn is known for her work on The Edge, where she's hosted top-rating shows like The Edge Afternoons and The Edge Night Show, as well as her appearances on TV shows like Dancing with the Stars and The Masked Singer NZ. Most recently, she's hosted her own podcast, Better Me, Hopefully. She is an absolute master of connecting with people on and off the mic and has built a loyal audience through her honesty, humour and heart. Today we are tapping into her incredible career to hear what she's learnt about the art of great interviewing, building community, creating standout content, and where she sees the future of radio and digital storytelling. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sharyn.
I always find those sorts of things so uncomfortable because I'm like, I sit in my seat. I'm like, oh, cool, we're starting the podcast. Then as the intro starts, I slowly start leaning back of like mad imposter syndrome. Like, I actually done all that stuff. It's so strange.
I know.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Either people feel really flattered and they're like, oh, well, that was nice, a little boost for my day, or like that tall poppy syndrome kind of kicks in, eh?
Yeah. I'm like sweating now.
Well, let's start at the beginning, eh? Like, what drew you into radio and what was your first break into the industry?
I think I really wanted to do something that was to do with music. Like when I was younger, I really wanted to be a songwriter or a pop star. I used to do my own kind of radio shows at home, and I just really loved the ability of connecting with people. Like I would have these connections with radio announcers. I think maybe because I was a bullied kid, but also they just kind of felt like your best friend. You really knew them, and if you met them, you're like, hey, how's it going? And those were the people that did radio really well. And so I just really was drawn to working in an industry that is surrounded by music. It's there to have fun, and as the longer it goes on, it's just about making people feel things, and whether that's happy or sad or angry or whatever, just being part of people's lives and giving them company is just a really special privilege of a job to have.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I love about radio as well. And because of the nature of it being like a one-to-one medium, you're talking directly to your audience and like involving them throughout your show. That's one of the key moments for me as well through my career that I've loved, is connecting with people. And even though as the host, you don't necessarily know who those people are, when you do get to meet people and they tell you their stories and like, oh, I listened in and you made me feel like part of the community or part of a conversation, it's really those hard-hitting moments, it makes it all worth it.
Yeah, we actually met a woman, last year, I think it was, and she'd come in for a marketing association thing, and she wanted a tour of the company, and she saw The Edge, and she loved The Edge, and she came in and she just burst into tears, and it was the most special moment, and we ended up getting her on the podcast, and she was like, I learned to speak English and learned slang by listening to your show. And I was like, wow, that's so crazy. And it was just like this really beautiful moment of, I interviewed a thumb last week and that helped somebody learn English. Like, that's so strange. But yeah, it's just little things like that. And I think the longer that you do it, the more you get to know your listeners, and a lot of them become really good friends. Like I've got one listener down in Southland, Tony T-Bone, and even now I'm not on radio, he messages me just as much. And when I was on maternity leave with Ruben and I was at hospital, he was at hospital, he messaged me every single day and like made me laugh and stuff. And you just end up having these really special relationships with people. And I think it's such a privilege to be able to say that's your job.
Yeah. I love that. Has there been a moment maybe early on in your career that you feel like really shaped you?
Yes, most definitely. I think there's two moments that really come to mind for me. I think, especially when I started in radio, it was a real time where females were in the corner having to do the laugh. The man would do the setup, they'd do the joke. You'd come in and be like, oh man. Everyone would laugh at you. And I didn't like that. So I had two moments. One when I was working in like an on-air show and I had done a burn, which I stand by, was very funny. And they didn't appreciate it. And they just went dead silent, hung me out to dry. I was like, okay, cool, man. And so after that, just it was downhill from there. It was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm not going to be the girl that just laughs and takes it. If you give it to me, I'm going to give it back to you. I want to be as good as the boys. I'm not going to sit here and just be the dumb girl in the corner. And pretty much every person, bar a couple, were really embracing of that. And I loved it. And the show that didn't work on, I told them to get fucked in a blaze of glory and stopped working on their show. And it was the best thing and a great turning point for me because it made me realize that I don't have to be the girl in the corner that's just being like, oh man, and being the person that's telling everyone off all the time and the boys just get to be fun. So that was a really pivotal moment for me. And another one was in my off-air job. I used to be the music director for The Edge whilst I was doing days and reading news on The Breakfast Show. And I would do meetings with record companies every week. And I remember one week, if one of my bosses, like people above me in the music department walked in, sometimes they would literally turn around and start again when they walked in. And one morning I literally left the meeting, went and made my breakfast and came back. They hadn't even noticed I'd left. And then there was another one where they were playing me a song and they're like, it's basically New Zealand's Adele. And in my mind, I was like, this is the biggest heap of shit I've ever heard. And I remember afterwards, my boss, Leon, he pulled me into the office and he was like, you know that's bullshit. Don't let them sell that shit to you. Stand up for yourself. It's like they think that you're just going to be the nice, polite girl that just goes, just go, no. You need to be firm and assertive and you don't have to sit there and be passive. And that was I don't like confrontation, but he gave me the confidence that I could speak my mind in my job. And I think those two were really turning moments for me to be like, nah, fuck that. I'm not going to let people control my career and my personality because it makes them feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do feel like, and this is changing thankfully, but I do feel like historically radio and even podcasting has been quite a male dominated space. So to be able to not just come in as the like nice polite girl who's just going to sit on the edge and, you know, just coast on by and you're just kind of there for the diversity tick, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I think it's hopefully the space is changing. I've even seen in the podcast industry, like it is still quite male dominated. So I'm really hoping that does start to shift. And I think moments like that do really create a bit of hope for that.
I think that like two of my proudest moments working at the Edge was, first of all, when Jaden won Quit Your Day Job and we started doing the afternoon show together, and Jaden is like super proudly Māori and he really brought Te Reo Māori to the Edge and he would use it all the time. It wasn't just like your token mahi or whatever, which is great. I want to hear as much Reo Māori on radio as possible, but he was bringing in different greetings, it's coming up, and teasing and all sorts of things, and he would say them and then say what it was in English, and he really brought Reo Māori to the Edge, which was I don't think he realized how impactful that was, but it was possibly what our show was remembered for the most, like that people spoke to us about the most was like, you guys, they've like really embraced it, and like Jaden's brought this awesome new level. And the other thing I'm super, super proud of is, and I don't really think it got the credit that it deserved, to be honest, but Steph, myself, and Nixon were the first ever show on the Edge that had two females and someone who was Samoan. And it was the first time. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And it was showing that we're going in that right direction, because historically, if you look at a bunch of like other CHR stations and stuff, there's no diversity on them really at all. And it was really cool to like look at it and be like, yay, we're finally hearing voices on the edge that we should have been hearing a long time ago. And I always say that to Nixon, because Nixon went back to my FM after a couple of years, and he said that it was his Japan trip away from Mai. Mai is like Nixon's home. But I always say to Nixon, I hope that you always remember and you're proud of the fact that you made history by being the first Pacifica person on the edge, and you showed other people in the Pacifica community that it's possible. And also, Steph and I showed that you can have two women on a show and it can be successful, because I can only think of one or two shows that had two females on them at the same time. It's usually one guy, one girl, two guys, and a girl, or two guys. But the only other one I can think of is Stacey Morrison, Anika Moore, and Mike Puru, and that was an incredible show as well. So it's yeah, and now Flavor, they've got two girls. They've got Kaylee and Azura and Charlie, and you're seeing it more often now, which I can't believe it took till 2025, but I'm really proud that I was part of both of those things, because radio needs to get moving in that direction a bit more, I think.
Absolutely. And as you should be proud. You know, as we're talking, I was thinking back to my uni days. So I studied radio like 10 years ago now. And then my cohort, I feel, was predominantly female. So it's interesting that these shifts are only just being kind of seen on air. It's good that we are getting in the right direction, but it's bloody taking its time.
It is taking its time, but it's good. It's happening. So that's great.
It is happening, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a piece of advice that you would give to someone who was just starting out, or something that you wish that you knew when you were starting out?
I think it's something I did know when I started, because it was always drummed into me as a kid, is that attitude is everything. And it's crazy to me how quickly people forget that. And it's the putting your hand up, not waiting to be chosen, getting your ass off the wall and saying, hey, I really want to do that one day. What have I got to do to get there? What can I do to help? Even if it's the shittiest job ever, you just get in there and you do it, and you play the long game. And it's crazy sometimes the things that I hear, and I'm like, play the long game. Like, it sounds hard now, but it's going to be worth it. You know, like, I started on a 6-day contract earning $21,000 a year, working 6:30 in the morning. I'd be going home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you just made it with no money, but you played the long game, because eventually, if you kept working really hard, you'll get to where you want to go, and it will all work out in the end. So I think that's my thing, is like, attitude is everything, and play the long game. And also, I think it's something that Bryce, my husband, and I talk about a lot, and it's not just a radio thing, it's just a life thing, is that you have to learn how to take the L. Like, no one likes confrontation. Confrontation sucks. I hate it. But if someone's telling you that something you've done has, in a constructive way, isn't the way to do it, or has upset them in some way, or something bad has happened, you just have to learn to take the L and be like, you're right, that's my bad. Sorry, I'll learn from it. It's like, know better, do better. But I think a lot of people don't take the L, especially coming through that younger generation. If they get pulled into line about something, it's like, oh, no, you know, and it's just learning to take the L, and then it's done. Know better, do better. And like that, I'm the same. I'm still learning things. Like, my boss, Casey, would say things to me, and I was like, no, you're right about that. No, you're right. Sorry about that. Yeah. Sometimes not straight away, but I would get there and be like, no, you're right. That's my bad. And I think that that's a beautiful quality for a person to have.
100%. And I think in terms of your personal growth and in terms of the industry growth, you know, things are changing all the time at a societal level, at an industry level. And if you're not willing to learn and adapt, then you're just going to get left behind, you know?
100%.
Do you think that with the young people that you mentioned who aren't so willing to like take on that criticism, I wonder if that might be to do with fear of like being cancelled?
I think it's, so my friend Ross, actually, he sent me this thing years ago, and it blew my mind and it completely changed my perspective. So I'm like the very end of Gen Z, I think. I'm like on the cusp. I'm a millennial. Who cares? Like, I'm almost 40, right? When I grew up, it was, you can do anything that you want to do. You can do anything you put your mind to, but you have to work really hard for it. And Ross sent me this video, and it was a TED talk about how this entire generation, like Gen Z and the one after, they've been taught their whole generation, you can do anything that you want to do. You can do anything that you want to do. But the important part that was left off was, but you have to work really hard for it. So unless that was something that your family had instilled in them, the generation before, a lot of people did. There was a real big period of it, of people that would come through and turn up for work experience, be like, oh, I thought I was going to be doing nights. You know, what the, no, like, that person's been here for 10 years. They're number one. What are you talking about? So I think it's like that's quite a big part of it, is like, you can do anything that you want, but you've got to work really hard for it. You're not just going to get it given to you because you want it. And I think, yeah, when I watched that video that Ross sent me, I was like, oh my God, he's so right. That is incredibly accurate, because we are encouraging everyone, be yourself, do what you want, but we still have to like work for what we get given. You can't just be given it.
Yeah, totally. And then once you finally get the thing you're trying to strive for, it'll just be all the more sweet, won't it?
Yeah, definitely, because you've worked for it. You've actually earned it. You appreciate it. Sometimes if you're just given it and you haven't worked for it, you don't understand the privilege that has been given to you, especially in our jobs. Like, you don't understand the hustle that a lot of people have given, and you don't have the respect of the hustle of people that have given to get straight in there. And that's not everybody. A lot of people do. But I think if you just get it given to you, you don't appreciate it in the same way, because you haven't had to work really hard for it.
So over your career, the digital landscape has evolved quite a bit and shifted the way that radio works. What have been some of the biggest ways that you have seen the radio landscape evolve through your career?
So I was there. We first got cameras and a chat room. That was crazy. And we just had these cameras like watching us in the studio with no sound, and people would sit on them and just watch them. So that was kind of weird. The biggest change was that we had to, all of a sudden, we'd have to make an effort in what we wore to work. We were having, at first, well, still a lot of people do, they'll go in with like a full face of makeup, where, as you can tell from this podcast, I kind of gave up and didn't really give a shit anymore. Like, some days I'll be like, yeah, all good. But then I'm like, I'm just me. Like, it's not going to make what I say any better or worse if I've got a beautiful face of makeup on. I mean, it will make me feel way hotter when I watch the videos back. But it became a thing where you started to become more paranoid about what you look like. It gave another layer of things that people were mean to you about. And yeah, but I think the biggest thing is you now have to think about it from every angle. Like, okay, this is how it's going to work on radio. This is what it will look like digitally. How can we build our followers on this? Or that video didn't go really well, but this one did. And then you're like having to stay on top of the trends and like all this stuff. And it's just like, it became this constant treadmill of content. And that's really fun, but it's hard to keep up with. It's like the treadmill just keeps getting faster, because you're like, okay, we're doing radio, but now we're going to have a camera in there. Okay, sweet, I'm having a job. We're doing radio, but we're going to put videos up. Okay, we're running a little bit faster. And then we're doing radio. We've got to do a TikTok trend. We've got to do a video for a client. You've got to film all your radio breaks. I want to have 2 videos up of this. You've got to do that. We've got to do this. And you're like sprinting on this treadmill, like, oh my God, there's only so much content that one person can come up with, especially when you've got 2 kids and like you're not doing anything. So you're like, so it can be exhausting, but I do feel like it's just the treadmill's just getting faster to keep up with the amount of content that people consume now, because our attention span is like 10 seconds.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. How have you seen the digital landscape affect things like you now also have to do a podcast?
I don't think radio podcasts are done as well as they should be, because a lot of the times it's just like copy and pasted from the show and then they're just like put in, which is that's just how they're made. I find it hard to listen to them because sometimes you'll hear the back ends of like a break or whatever, but definitely like more to think about. if that makes sense. And then all of a sudden you're like obsessed with how your radio show is going to rate and the interaction you're getting on social media. And then you're looking at podcast charts, and then you're getting the stats on the podcast, and the podcast needs to be bigger. And you're like, well, am I focusing on the podcast, or am I focusing on the social, or am I focusing on the radio? Like, you've just got to try to get it all in one brain.
Yeah. It is massive. And as you say, there's so many different things that you have to be thinking about. And I feel like this would be particularly daunting for those young people who are coming in, trying to put their best foot forward and trying to have a good attitude and trying to do it all. Do you have any advice for those people?
I think don't rush it. People think, and you would know this as well, people think making a podcast is so easy, and they'll just willy-nilly be like, let's make a podcast. Okay, I've made this picture on ChatGPT. Let's put it up. We'll put it on the feed, and there we go. But a podcast, actually, I think you really need to put some thought into it. Like, why is yours going to be different? How are you going to present it? What's it going to sound like? What's it going to look like? Why are you doing the podcast in the first place? Are you nailing the other things in your life before you start taking on this other thing as well? And I think just don't rush, because you could actually have a really, really cool idea, but you rush it because you just want to get it out there, and then you miss a few tricks and it won't be as big as it should be. So I think it's like, plan it, don't rush it, and do it properly.
I think the other thing is, like, people don't necessarily realize how big podcasts are and like how much work it is, especially if you're going to be doing it weekly or even fortnightly. That's a lot of content to be coming up with. If you're going to be interviewing, if you don't have that kind of background or training, interviewing is actually quite an art skill that you have to learn, and it's not something that just comes naturally to a lot of people. And you know that you're picking up all these skills, and then there's video that you may or may not be doing as part of your podcast, and then the editing and the distribution and the marketing of it. You know, it is like quite a big beast. Being prepared and learning as much as you can, being willing to outsource some things or get some support and help if you can, but also like go a bit easy on yourself, and you know, you can start small and grow from there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. For example, Between Two Beers didn't just happen because they were like, let's release a podcast. They worked really, really hard at it, and they grew this beast of a podcast, and they grind hard. And the amount of work that goes into their podcast, it just goes to show that, like, if you work hard, then you're going to have more success than if you just like, oh, see how it goes.
Yeah.
Give it a crack.
Totally. And I think you need to have that mindset before you get started, that this is going to be a lot of work. Can I take that on right now?
Yeah.
You are an amazing interviewer. How do you prepare for interviews, and what is your secret to getting people to open up?
So I used to write all my questions, and I just like go through my questions and answer them. And then my husband, Bryce, he does the Breakfast Show on the Rock. He's my favorite interviewer, and not being biased. He gets stuff out of people that no one else could get. He has like people that come to New Zealand that will do no press but Bryce, because they love doing interviews with him and they remember him. Like when he would go and do an interview with the Foo Fighters or whatever, they're always like, hey Bryce, how's it going? How's the boys? They remember him because he's good at his job. And I think the thing that I learned from him is know your questions and flip them over and listen. He was like, you don't listen in interviews. I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, you ask your question, you get your answer, and then you ask your next question. And you miss so much stuff because you don't listen to their answer, and they're giving you better shit in their answer than what you asked them. So you need to have 2 ears, 1 mouth, flip your questions over, know a guide of where you're going to go, but listen to what they're saying, because that's where the good shit is. And I was like, oh my God. And so I started doing it, and my interviews just got better and better. And towards the end of my career, I would write 1 or 2 questions, have a quick read. And then when I did the interview, I would have my computer shut, and I would just go in and be like, how are you? What's going on? Like, and just actually have a real conversation rather than trying to be wacky, trying to get dirt and all that sort of stuff. Just having a real conversation with people. And when you start having that real conversation, that's when you can go and ask those questions that they probably wouldn't have answered if you just came in hot and was like, so are you, Chris Hughes, are you fucking Jojo Siwa or what? You can't ask that straight out the gate. You've got to warm it up and they've got to trust you. And then if you've earned their trust, you can feel the vibe of whether or not you're going to get an answer from that question or not. But I tend to have a read, shut my computer, and then just talk to them like a real person, and I get way better stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular interview highlights from over your career?
Oh, God. One of my favorite ones is I Love Lady Gaga. And I remember being sent Just Dance and the Fame album, and Just Dance had just come out, and we got the only phone interview in New Zealand. It was when I was on nights. And we interviewed her, and she gave us stuff in that interview that 6 months later, when she'd blown up with Just Dance and she'd blown up with Poker Face, she came to New Zealand with Pussycat Dolls, and our breakfast show asked her the same questions pretty much. And we played our interview next to their interview. And in that 6 months, she was refusing to answer the questions that she had answered for us. She sang us her first ever song. She refused to sing it for them. And it was really cool. Another one was we were interviewing Rihanna once, and she said the C word. And there was this big controversy in America about how she couldn't say, like, how that's really offensive. And we were like, oh, you know, like in New Zealand, we say like GC and like stuff like that. And so that was really funny, just like when she was learning something like that. Or, last year, this is niche, but I am obsessed with this artist called Grip. She's like a pop star. She was on the Eras tour. She's incredible. And I really wanted to interview her because she was doing a show at the Power Station. And I got told there was no guests. And I was sitting in the studio, and Brayden, who was producing my podcast, was like, oh, I've got to do this interview with this person. And I was like, what, why? Like, why are we doing it at the Edge? I was like, where is this person? I was like, I don't have any, like, you haven't sent me the information. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And I was real stressed. And then Brayden had just left, and I was like, where has he gone? And then Griff walks into the studio, and I like look over. She's like, hey. I look over, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And I have no prep. I'm so emotional. I'm like genuinely surprised. It's so hard to surprise me. And then I did one of my best interviews ever because I was just like, I know everything about you. Let's talk about it. And it was so cool. Like, I think I always try to tell myself, a lot of people get too cool for having the chance to interview people's heroes. And I've definitely had people that afterwards that I'm like, I'll never interview you again. You're an asshole. But I just never ever wanted to be too cool for and not appreciate that you get that privilege to interview those people. Yeah, that'd be my favorites.
What do you think's the difference between a good interview and a great interview?
If the person you're interviewing it enjoyed it. Yeah, so like you can have a good interview and you get like the stock standard answers that they give everybody, but when you make somebody so comfortable in an interview that they don't want the interview to end, that they get told to wrap it up and they're like, it's fine. They stay after the interview and want to chat. Like, I remember Ed Sheeran, he was doing a co-host. It was supposed to be half an hour, and he stayed for an hour and a half. He went out and got his guitar and played Tenerife Sea, one of his songs, for the first time. It had never been heard anywhere in the world on our show. And his manager was like, no, like, it hasn't been released. And he was like, with all due respect, fuck up, it's my song and I'm going to play it. And so he grabbed his guitar, played Tenerife Sea. No one in the world had ever heard it before. I'm sitting like a meter away, just like, what the hell is happening? And then we did this thing called the cover challenge, and he had 2 minutes of an Avicii song to learn Royals by Lorde, and then he just like busted it out. And it was just those interviews where the person is so comfortable that they just love being there, and that's when you know you've done a great interview.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the sign of the best interviewers are the ones who know how to make a safe space for their guests where they can open up and be vulnerable, and also the ones that know their shit and then listen.
Yes.
Like, two of my favorite interviewers are Alex Cooper, Call Her Daddy, and Graham Norton. Alex Cooper.
Me too.
Yeah, because so Alex Cooper, she is amazing at getting people to open up and just creating a space where she can ask those like deep and intense questions. And then Graham Norton, there have been so many occasions where he's trying to get that specific story because he's just done all of his prep, but then he's just engaging in the conversation and trying to get the guests to riff off each other.
He's so good. And it's, although the thing I've been annoyed about with Alex Cooper lately is that she'll have people on there and we're like, great, Alex Cooper's going to get the tea. But then she's been given the interview. She's allowed to ask about it, but dance around it. Like, you know how Katy Perry got asked about Dr. Luke and she just let her get away with dancing away from it. And it was like, Alex, the old Alex would not have let that happen. So but I understand the position that she would have been in. I also really love the Las Culturistas podcast with Bowen Yang and Matt Rogers. I think they get some really good stuff because they're just so fun and they're actual fanboys of like who they're interviewing. And if you like reality TV, there's a guy named Nick Vile and he just does not hold back. He just goes for all the tea. Like whenever I see anyone that's going to get interviewed, I know that he's just going to be like, nah, but for real, why did you do that? And not let them away with it. I love that sort of stuff. But my favorite interviewers at the moment are the Las Culturistas podcast for sure.
Nice. I have to add that to my list.
And Amy Poehler, she's got
the good hang. Love that podcast. It's just a casual conversation. Again, I feel like it just comes down to engaging in the conversation and knowing your points, knowing what you want your angle to be, but at the end of the day, just engaging and taking the lead of your guests.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you had an interview flop?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about one?
Oh, how much time have you got? So I had one interview with a New Zealand artist on 4 Live, which was like a music after school show. And I could tell that they just couldn't be effed doing it. And I'd gone to all this effort. And like, even when I was prepping for it, I was like, this isn't our audience. Our audience, they're not, this audience, it's an old audience that cares about this band or whatever. Anyway, so I have to prep this interview. They come in. He was so rude. And then him and the other guy left. The other guy was really nice, but the singer was just an absolute cock. And they left, and I burst into tears in the control room. I was like, I'm never interviewing them again. That was awful. That guy is so mean. Like, he's just horrible. Like, who does he think he is? And he'd also had a go at one of my old co-hosts at like a music awards party once, who was trying to give him a compliment. Anyway, but the most awkward part was I was crying. And the nice one came back because he forgot his keys. And he's like, oh, I forgot my keys. And I was like, oh, God.
Oh, like, no.
I was like, oh, my God. And then the other two that remind me, one would be when Panic at the Disco were like humongous. They came to New Zealand and we interviewed, maybe, I can't remember which one it was. But then afterwards, they took us into the green room and we were getting stuff signed for listeners. And they just didn't even look at us. Like, they were like, this is Brad and Sharyn from New Zealand Radio, blah, blah, blah. And they just, like, didn't even look at us. I was like, oh, okay, cool, man. And then, what's another one? Oh, Chester from, like, R.I.P. Chester from Linkin Park and DJ Han. I went and it was my first interview by myself. And they kept leaning back, so I'd have to lean forward. And I was wearing, like, a low-cut top, so I felt really uncomfortable. We were using this, like, recorder I'd never used, and something happened with it, so it wasn't working properly. And then just through the whole interview, they just made it they both just made it really hard and really awkward. And yeah, it was a horrible experience. I cried in the taxi the whole way back. It was so bad that the record company texted me afterwards and was like, I'm so sorry for putting you in that position. Like, they were dicks, blah, blah, blah. And the cool thing was that Mike Shinoda was there. And he was so nice. He was like, hey, how's it going? I'm Mike, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, God, I hope I get him. And then I got the other two. So after that, I refused. I was like, I'm not interviewing anyone from Linkin Park unless it's Mike Shinoda because I was just traumatized. I think that's all of my bad ones.
Have you ever had one that didn't go to air?
Yeah. 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 That Linkin Park one.
So how do you deal with an interview? Like, you're in the interview, you know it's flopping. Like, what do you do?
Oh, one that definitely didn't go to air was it Lil Yachty? I think it was Lil Yachty. Anyway, so he'd flown in. He doesn't like doing interviews. He was actually a really nice person, but hates doing interviews. He had 2 phones, and during his interview, he wasn't looking at us. He'd answer the questions while he was texting on 2 different phones. And then I said to him, I was like, oh, you don't like doing interviews, eh? And he goes, not really. They make me quite uncomfortable. And I was like, they shouldn't make you do interviews if they make you feel anxious. And he goes, yeah. And I was like, should we just wrap it up? And he was like, yeah. And so we just like wrapped it up. And I was like, I get it. He'd come fresh off a flight. He was jet lagged and he just felt uncomfortable. And I was like, let's not keep going with that. I got, oh God, I'm having all these like traumatic memories. The bad experiences are probably like the easiest stories to remember, but there aren't as many bad ones as there are good ones.
Yeah. What do you think makes good content? Like, how do you know if something's going to land well or fall flat?
I think good content is you have to invoke a feeling out of somebody. So it's a feeling of ha ha ha, or what the fuck, or me too, or huh. That's a good way of looking at it. Like if your content gives somebody a feeling, then you've done it. Like that's what you got to do. If they're able to just be like, huh? And like start texting or doing something else, they're not really listening to it. They're not connecting with it. So if you've got content that people actually are interested in and it makes them feel something, then that's when you're onto a winner.
How do you do that?
You just have to be a real person. People are so smart now. They can tell if you're faking it. Sometimes I look at things and I'm like, who thought to film that? People can tell when someone's authentic or when they're not authentic, I think. You can see things when people are like trying to cry to try and get that connection. Or you can tell if someone is genuinely feeling that emotion. I think that especially because there's so much content being given to us so much now, that you can call a fake pretty quickly, and you can be like, that's not real. And if people aren't buying into it and they don't think it's real, then that is not. I think that you just have to be authentic, and people are either going to be into it or not. And also just like when you watch it, you're like, how does this make me feel? Like when I listen to it, I'm like, how does this make me feel? Did this make me laugh? Did I smile? Am I cringing? And if I'm not feeling any of those things, I'm like, fuck it, I'm not going to put it out there. But I think it's good to get people to watch it. And also with me, like I'll get my friends that I know are brutally honest to be like, hey, am I posting too much? Hey, my TikTok's cringy? And they give me real honest feedback. They're like, fuck, you're posting too much, or, or this is actually real interesting. And just like listening to the people that consume your content, and also just being authentic. It's probably the short way of saying it. It's a hard to describe because for me, it's a feeling.
Yeah.
Like I can feel it when I watch it that I'm like, yeah, that's good. That's not good. That's good. That won't work. But it's a feeling. So I don't know how to.
No, I think that authenticity is even more important these days with the rise of AI, and everyone's best friend is ChatGPT, and people can spot it from a mile away. I was thinking about, there's even AI generated podcasts where you can upload PDFs or whatever, and it will turn it into a podcast. And I was like, what is that going to do to the podcast industry? And you know what? I think at the end of the day, people relate to people, and that will always be the case. And people can tell when you're being fake. They can tell when it's not real. And AI can be a useful tool, but at the end of the day, if it's not people-centered, I feel like it's not going to do well.
100%. And it's like the most successful creators of content, whether it's radio, TV, podcasts, social media, whatever, it's their personality, right? So if you start, they want to use our voices for like radio ads and things like that, and they just have your voice on file and they put it in. And it does sound like you, but I've said, if you want to use my voice, give me the option to voice it first, because I would rather say it as myself than have a robot say it for me. Like I'd rather come in and give you my inflections, my personality, my smile in my voice,
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. It's sucking a lot of authenticness out of everything. So I think that when you do find somebody on social media who is super authentic, it really hits because you know that it's real.
Yeah. And it's almost refreshing.
Yes. Yeah. And you can also tell the people that are trying to be real.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
people are just, you can tell when someone's trying to be real, and you can just honestly be yourself. Don't think about who's watching it. Just like make it, and then afterwards watch it and go, yeah, that's shit, or yeah, that's good. But don't think about it at the time of like, oh, my friend's going to see this, or what's Bryce going to think of that, and like, blah, blah. Just like let your freak flag fly, make your content, and then watch it after. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. And a lot of people, especially when they're just starting up, can feel a bit awkward about watching themselves back, or, you know, oh, I hate the sound of my voice, or, oh, that's far too cringe. Do you have any advice on like how to get over that?
Don't care. That's the only thing that you can do, is just don't care. So I'm working on this with somebody at the moment. It's actually really fun. We're working on this at the moment. I've got this amazing woman that I'm coaching for radio at the moment, but she's naturally quite shy. So she's really awesome at all of the basics and all the formatics. And I'm like, this week, all I want you to do is let your freak flag fly. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, be silly. Who gives a shit? Sing the words to a song. Give me an impression of what you're talking about. Just be silly. She's like, oh my God, like cringe. I'm like, but cringe is fine. It's a reaction. So you're getting that reaction. If you're getting a reaction from somebody, you've done the right thing on your content because they're engaged enough to react to you. So it's really just as simple as, if it makes you laugh, if it makes you feel good, then do it. If someone likes it, great. And if they don't like it, then who cares? At the end of the day, there's so much content that we can consume. I have done things on radio that I think are really funny because I have got the zoomies, I've got ADHD, I've not taken my medication, and I'm like, this is crack up, but it's way too weird. And so people that know me and like me, that are like what they call a P1, so somebody that like you're their number one on the preset, they're like classic Sharyn, crack up. But the people that don't understand my personality are like, who the fuck is this weird girl that's just made her co-host interview her as a thumb? Like, but in my head, I'm like, this is like Family Guy crack up, like super weird. And to me, it's funny, and to my friends, it's funny. But for people that don't get it, they're like, whatever. But you don't know if you don't try, so just try it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And it's annoying when it doesn't work, but genuinely, there's nothing other than just putting pedal to the metal and letting your freak flag fly. Like,
yeah, I love that. I love that. And I feel like a big thing, especially with radio, but also with podcasting, is that your personality is really what connects with people. And, you know, I briefly hosted a radio show, and afterwards, like, even though I wasn't a regular announcer or anything, I still had people come up to me and be like, feel like they know me, even though I have no idea who they are. And I feel like that's the beautiful thing about this medium, is building those communities and building those connections. And if you can let your freak flag fly, I love that. I'm going to say it from now on. You know, you can really find people who relate with that, you know, like not everyone is for everyone. And I think especially with podcasting, even more so than radio, because radio can be quite broad still, but with podcasting, you're really finding your niche, you know, you're really finding your people. And I think the size of your audience doesn't matter as long as it's the right audience.
And they're engaged.
They're engaged.
I was talking to someone about this the other day. They were like, oh, I posted this video and it only got 12,000 views. And I was like, babe, you've got 6,000 followers. So your entire audience plus double your audience, we're engaged with your video. That's amazing. So if you think of it like that, as your audience is actually engaging with you, or you have 100,000 followers and you got 10,000 views, you know, like it's actually... If it's small but they're engaged, that's better than having a big number and hardly any people engage with you. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I like that because all of us are a bit weird, you know, like all of us have our weird thing. We have our weird little idiosyncrasies that we have, and that's the great thing about podcasting, is that you can literally type your weird thing into a podcast platform and so many different options will come up of what you need. Like
Yeah.
whether you're into bloody true crime or hobbies or whatever, parenting, dumb shit, like whatever, you can go on there and find whatever you are looking for to give your weirdness company and feel seen. And that's, I think, really amazing.
Totally agree. So through your career, building community has always been like a massive part of your work. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that comes down to what we're just saying, like being yourself and authenticity. But do you have any tips on how to like build and maintain that connection with your audience?
I think that you've just got to remember the show's not for you, it's for them.
Yeah.
So you're not above them. You're not cooler than them. You are them. You are their friend. You guys are on the same level. Whether you're living in some big fancy house and they're living, on minimum wage and gore, you're on the same level and you're never bigger than your audience. As soon as you think that you're bigger than your audience and you're better than them or whatever, and your stories and your shit is more important than theirs, and they don't feel included, then I think that's like a big fail. How I always like to look at it is you want to be that fun table at the bar. Like, when you go to the bar and there's that one table and they're having such a great time and you're like, fuck, I want to go see what's happening over there. You can have some shows where you look over and you see their table at the bar and you're like, fuck it, let's go join them. And you go over and they're like, hey, and everyone joins in. But then you also have those tables at the bar where you're like, should we? Shouldn't we? I don't know. Shall we? And then you go over and they all like, hey, and make you feel so uncomfortable that you're like, we're gonna go back now. So I think being the fun table at the bar and having time for your listeners really increases that audience, because I always remember the story that we got told. It was like 10 years ago or something, and they were doing like an Edge panel and they were finding out, like, what do you like about the Edge? What do you not like about it? Who's your favorite radio show? Blah, blah, blah. And there was this one girl who was diehard Jason PJ, who were on ZM at the time, and they were phenomenal. Like, they were one of those soulmate shows that they were just such a special time in radio. They were so good. And this one girl, she was like, could not be turned from anyone but Jason PJ. And then our boss at the time was like, what is it about Jason PJ that is so diehard for you? Like, what is it that you've connected to? And she goes, I was in Wellington at McDonald's in Manners Mall. I was really drunk and my card declined. And so Jace bought me a cheeseburger combo and sat with me until I got a taxi. That was it. And then she was diehard Jason PJ forever. And it was because, well, Jace Hawkins is one of the greats anyway, but it was because he's not above his listeners. He doesn't think he's cooler than them. He genuinely gives a shit about them, and he had time. And I think that's what you've got to do with your listeners is you've just got to have time, and they're the ones that make you successful. So if you don't appreciate them and you don't put in the hard yards with them and you're not just using them to pump up your ego, then that's how you nurture that community, is that you make them feel like they're just as part of you as you are of them. And to me, I did feel that. There's Edge listeners that I've literally grown up with since I was 20 years old. There's Edge listeners that I remember being 13 that have now got kids or are married, or that we still talk to each other, or I still have cards from them that they wrote me when they were 18, like just little things like that you genuinely have a connection with. Like I did a telegram at Simon, a listener's wedding, because Simon was a part of our daily life, and it's just, they genuinely become your mates. And so they would ring up, and I love, that was my favorite part of my job, was the banter that you'd have with listeners, because you developed an actual relationship and friendship with them that wasn't just them telling you they're cool. Like, you actually gave a shit about them. Yeah.
Can you tell me about one of the most powerful or maybe surprising listener experiences that you've had?
You know what? This is going to sound real name droppy, but I genuinely don't mean it to. So when I was doing the night show, I used to get messages on Twitter from this girl, and they were intense. And she was having a horrific time. And she sent me all these messages, and I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, I can't ignore her. I can't block her. So I took it into my DMs because I also was like, I don't want people to pick on her at school, like if they see that. So we would message on DMs, and she would tell me things like abuse that she was suffering at home, how she was suicidal, all this sort of stuff. And I was like 22 or something, so I didn't know how to handle that. So I would like send her help, places she could get help from, and all of that sort of stuff. And I knew that there was another radio announcer she'd been doing the same thing to, and that radio announcer had instead publicly declared her crazy and a liar and all this sort of stuff, and it was fucked. So she would message me all the time, and then she just disappeared. And for years, I was like, where is she gone? Her Twitter was gone, everything was gone. And I feared the worst. I was like, oh my God, she's killed herself. Like she just disappeared. And then, I don't know how many years later it was, we were doing an interview, and she walked in, and we finished the interview, and I said to her, did you message me on Twitter? And she was like, yeah, I did. And I was like, did you message me about, and she's like, yeah. She was like, I've been real anxious about this interview that you would remember. And I just looked at her and I was like, Jazz Thornton, I am so glad you're alive, because I thought you were dead. And I just gave her the biggest hug. And it was Jazz Thornton, the mental health advocate. Wow. And she used to message me as a kid. And I genuinely was like, fuck, that kid has taken her life because of that piece of shit that was abusing her. And that was just like the power of radio, I guess. And then we used to get kids that would ring up every day that were being bullied at school, and everyone would make fun of them when I was on the night show. And so we used to like make them like rock stars on our show, or we just sit there and talk to them so they had one person that was nice to them that day. Sometimes we would get people that were special needs that would call up, or they were neurodiverse, and would take them a long time to get their words out, so they were hard to put on air because they'd need to be edited and stuff. And some people would be impatient and not talk to them or whatever, or be like, oh, we've got to go, mate, or they'll have do not answer or whatever. And I'd just answer them, and I'd be like, hey man, and then we'd just have a chat. I'm like, okay, cool, man, all right, well, hey, we've got to go now, but it was great to hear from you, blah blah blah. And all it took was that like 3-minute conversation for them to get this thing out of their head, and then it's done.
I think that big thing is just having time for people, and as you say, not thinking, this is below me, or like I'm too good for that. I think that's such a big thing, not only in terms of building an engaged community and like, you know, building your engagement, but also just in terms of being a good person. Yeah,
that's it. And there's so many people that don't have that don't have time to stop and have that conversation. You know, like love the fact they're getting recognized, but they can't be bothered like engaging in much more than that, you know? And you're like, ugh, yuck.
Yeah.
Yuck.
I have quite a similar story, actually. So I used to work with Rema Media, which is the Christian radio network. And every year, because those radio stations are listener supported, so we would do an annual appeal. And a big part of that annual appeal is getting testimonials and stories from your listeners that you can play and then encourage other people to donate to the stations. So I was producing a show for this appeal one year, and I was asked to go and get someone who was downstairs and interview her to get her testimonial. And I was like, yep, sweet, you know, it's radio, so you want it to be short and snappy and, you know, get a good hook out of her, kind of thing. But I did not know who this person was. I did not know her story. I did not know anything about her. And the interview went on and on and on and on and on, like it was a very long, in-depth interview, very intense, that we could not end up playing on the station, like very intense. But you know what? It was giving that person that time and space to talk to you and share her story. You know, at the end of the day, even though it didn't air, it made a difference to her. And she got to, you know, get that off her chest and share that with someone and feel part of something bigger, you know, and I think that's really crucial, you know, in general as a person, but to your brand, to your podcast, to your engagement, you know, whatever. But at the end of the day, just like connecting with people, that's what it's all about at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's those things like, I remember then meeting someone in Christchurch, and he was showing me this skate park that he'd designed, and the others were like, God, that guy's on one, isn't he? I was like, he's just neurodiverse. It's fine, like, just got to be patient. Anyway, so he rings, and we had him as a caller, and at the end of the call, he was like, hey, I just also wanted to say thanks for not thinking I was weird and listening to me in Christchurch. And it was like, of course, like, I'm weird. I talk people's face off. Listen to this whole podcast. I've been talking your face off for ages. But it's just those small things. It's like, just be a kind person, and yeah, the community will come because you want to hang out with them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone who's wanting to get into podcasting today?
Just plan it, work hard, be yourself. Like, it's really that simple. It's like, find what your niche is, work hard, and just really think about what you're doing, and just remember that the podcast is for you, but you're actually doing it for somebody else. So like always thinking outwardly rather than just always thinking inwardly.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Listener first, people first, connection first.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Sharyn. That's been such a generous conversation about broadcasting, and then also about connection and creativity and building community. I think it's going to be really valuable to a lot of people who are starting their podcasts, especially those points about connecting and making your podcast really person first. I think that's a really key takeaway from this.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a really beautiful discussion. I found myself halfway through thinking to myself, I was like, oh God, Sharyn, you get very deep and serious with this. Like, don't get yourself in trouble being too honest. But I really enjoyed it. You've got such a cool vibe, and like, what you're doing is really awesome. So I think, I can't wait to keep listening and hear it all.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a great chat. And yeah, as I say, I think it's going to be really valuable to people who are wanting to, you know, get into the industry or start their own podcast. So thanks for that.
No, thank you.
If you love this interview, please hit follow wherever you listen. And if you are feeling extra kind, maybe you could leave a review.
Go on.
Yeah, go on. It all goes to help other people find the show who need it. And if you are ready to start or grow your own podcast, you can head to maxineLondonCreative.co.nz. I've got a bunch of resources there, coaching and a lot of extra support to help you find your voice and get it out into the world. Thank you again for hanging out with me. Until next time, keep creating, keep connecting, and keep podcasting. Thanks for listening to Wanna Podcast. If you got something out of this episode, give it some love. Subscribe, follow, share it with your friends, or leave a review. It all helps to get this podcast into the ears of those who need it. If you're keen to connect, check out Wanna Podcast or Maxene London Creative on Instagram, or head to maxinelondoncreative.co.nz. Check out the show notes for links. Thanks again for being part of my community. See you next time.